This is an example of play using the introductory scenario Cisterna and covers just 3 turns from the 30th of January to the 1st of February. It is designed for solo play and offers an excellent way to learn the game system. The US 3rd Division is set to try and capture Cisterna. Elements of the German Hermann Göring and the 26th Panzer Division are protecting the town. In a turn, first the German player rolls a dice to determine the weather. In this case the roll is 3 and the weather is clear. Clear is the most common weather type, but it can be also overcast or stormy. Next comes a supply check. As this is the first turn of the game, all units are in supply. Players then receive supplies for the turn. This is outlined in the scenario instructions. The US player in our game receives 18 supplies and the Germans 6. These are marked on the supply track. Next, reinforcements would become available, but as this is a training scenario, there are no reinforcements available during this scenario. Commands are then allocated, again according to the scenario instructions. The scenario states that the US has 2 and the German has only 1 command. These are marked on the track. The operation phase of the game now begins. The operation phase is the main part of the game where units move, fight, recover and other actions are taken. The US player starts with the initiative and therefore has the first opportunity to expend a command. The US player has 3 options: activate a division, activate a single hex, or use up to 2 army assets. The US player decides to activate the 3rd division. Next the player has to decide whether to activate it for a limited or a major operation. A major operation allows more actions to be used, but also has a higher cost in supplies. The Allied player aid shows the benefits and costs of both types of activation. As the Allies have plenty of supplies available, they declare that the 3rd Division is undertaking a major operation. In addition to activating the units of the 3rd Division, this activation also allows up to 2 independent units to be activated for an additional cost. The US player then also activates the Rangers and the 504th Paras. The red colour stripe indicate that these units are independent units. The US player therefore has a total of 13 actions, and this has cost them 12 supplies. The number of actions available are marked on the action track. The +10 count is used to show there are 13 actions. The supply track is also reduced by 12 supplies. All the actions are pooled and can be expended in any order among the activated units. Not every activated unit must take an action, and units may take multiple actions if they wish. A unit may spend an action to move, for combat, to support a combat, to reorganise, or change its deployment and facing from a defensive to an attack or an attack to defensive frontage. In that example, the US player moves the Rangers forward to block the Hermann Göring panzers from crossing the canal. An infantry unit such as the Rangers has 4 movement factors. It moves across the river to hex 0611 for the cost of 2 movement factors. The 504 Paras could have crossed the canal into the same hex, but by crossing a canal it would have caused them a temporary drop in their combat capacity. Next, the 7th Infantry are activated and cross the bridge into 1310. As they started and ended their turn adjacent to an enemy unit, they suffer movement attrition, and their combat capacity is temporarily reduced by 1. This unit is marked with an ivory temporary combat capacity marker to show its new value. Next, the 30th Infantry are moved up to occupy Camo Molto. The US player decides not to move the 504th Paras at the moment, as they may be needed if there is any breakthrough this turn. A unit can move more than once in a turn, but the second movement it will suffer movement attrition. So far the US player has expended 3 actions, 10 remain. The US player declares that the 15th Infantry are going to attack hex 1409. This will cost 1 action. You always attack a hex in Anzio Operation Shingle. The unit could have attacked 1309, but then the 7th Infantry could have helped in the attack, but the whole attack would have been penalised because one of the units is attacking across a river, especially as the river has no bridge. The 26th Panzers which are in a defensive frontage, now have the opportunity to fall back or receive the attack. Falling back would cost the Panzers a temporary combat capacity loss. The Panzers decide to hold their ground. The US player then declares which units are supporting the attack. Only the initial attacking unit may advance for free after combat. Other units will need to spend actions to do so, so it's important to make sure you have the right unit leading the attack. There are a few more aspects of choosing your lead unit, such as the unit type. They have certain benefits, but we'll just stick with an infantry unit for now. So supporting the attack, the 751st Tank are elected, and this costs another action. The US now have 8 actions remaining. The German defender now has the option of using any assets they have available. Army assets are the most powerful assets in the game, but these are expensive unless they are activated earlier in the turn. The German play aid shows that the 26th Panzer Regiment has the 165th Artillery Regiment as a divisional asset. The German player uses this asset and the regiment is marked with an asset used counter. This costs 2 supply. The US counter by using their 10th Field Artillery as their asset. Now the number of tactical tokens each side receives is calculated. The US forces are attacking with a total of 15 combat capacity and the Germans are defending with 7. This is a 2-to-1 advantage to the US, so the US get 2 tactical tokens and the Germans 1 to reflect the 2-to-1 advantage. Both sides have used the divisional artillery asset, so both sides gain an extra token. The US has a combined arms attack, as it has both infantry and army units attacking, and so gains an extra token for this. The German defensive position in Isabella also gains them another token. This is marked on the map by a small 1. This adds up to the US having 4 tokens and the Germans 3. This is not such a great advantage to the US, but this is only the first of their attacks. The US player places his token on the combat grid. The US player wants to cause as many casualties as possible and is not too worried about taking them himself in this situation. The scenario is very short and taking Cisterna in only 3 turns is going to be tough. The US player would like to place his counters across the top red line as this increases the intensity, but with only 6 supplies left for the turn he can't afford to. It cost him 2 supplies to use his divisional asset. Once the US player has placed his tokens, the German can now try and steer the outcome of the battle by placing his 3. He must continue the line from the last token placed by the US player. Being in a defensive frontage, the German unit may ignore a single retreat penalty result, and so he places his counters thus. The hex where the last token is placed is the combat result. This is the hex the last token was placed in. The black letters and numbers are the effect on the attacker and the red the defender. The number before the slash is a temporary combat capacity reduction and the number after is a permanent combat capacity reduction. Looking at the attacker's result, they have to lose 2 temporary combat capacity factors. The first factor is always taken from the leading unit, in this case the 15th Infantry. The next result is applied to a unit that has no marked losses, so in this case it's a 751st Tank. So both units are temporarily reduced by 1 combat capacity factor. The 26th Panzer has 2 results. The first result, marked D, is always applied, and so the 26th is reduced by 1 temporary combat capacity factor. The result after the R is the retreat result. A unit must pay this cost to stay in its hex or it must retreat. As stated before, the 26th is in a defensive frontage, so it can ignore 1 penalty, meaning it must only take 1 more temporary reduction rather than 2. With the US player still having actions remaining, the Panzers take the hit and are reduced in total by 2 temporary losses. The turn is still far from over, the US still having 6 actions remaining. The Germans have yet to take a command and the US also have another command, although the US supplies are now running very low. This is just a short example of some aspects of the play of the game. As stated before, the rules are only 8 pages long, although there's quite a lot of depth in there, and there are many other aspects of the play that I've yet to cover. Thanks for your time.